Ooh, yeah, let me keep you guys a little low.
Are we doing a countdown or
Eh,
are we rolling?
I'm pulling it up right now. For all we know, dude, we could be rolling
Is
right
this?
now.
I'm assuming since
I see.
Trey
We got a starting
unplugged his
soon up. It'd be
microphone.
funny. I wonder if we can hear us.
Oh, Trey says we're rolling for sure. Yeah. Well,
We're
hello
rolling for sure.
everyone.
Oh, hi
Welcome.
everybody. Oh, live is
Well,
great.
yeah, I love doing. We really should have started. We should have done this like right from the get go. Um, well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Midgar Minute Podcast. I'm Chris,
Yo,
joined as always by my lovely and faithful co-host Nick. Nick, how you doing on this fine evening?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be
Yeah.
here. We're talking about a fun little game, fun little chapter. Let me see. Is this it? Is this where we're at? We cut off right after you said we are probably talking.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Well,
So it cut off. So it was coming in at one point.
it was, and then something occurred.
Let me see. Is this it? Is this where we're at? Cut off right after you said we are probably talking.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Wow.
So it cut off. So it was coming in at one point.
It was, and then something occurred.
Let me see. Is this it? Is this where we're at? Going again. We're
Hello,
back.
everyone.
We are so back.
We are so back.
We are so back. Beautiful.
As we do so. Yeah. I don't. Should we start over again? I don't.
Look here. Look. Let's speed run. So let's give a lovely shout out to the Mosey gang in case we missed it on the last one.
Yes,
You're all beautiful.
all
Again, we
the
read all
Mosey
the names
gangers.
earlier. If that happened to get cut off, we'll read them again. But like we always say, all we ask is you come to hang out, and just know that if you want to become a member, you only need to give $1 to get into our Discord. You give $1
only
one
one
time,
time too.
and you can never
Not
give
even
again. And you're
monthly.
married in, family plan, and everything. Now we're talking about a great chapter today, aren't we, Chris?
Oh yes, one of the best, honestly, in like a low key kind of way. Just as it's a real good setup because and it's technically, as much as I would like to say like the first chapter is like a prologue type deal. This is like our first real quote unquote chapter in this game, and there's a lot of stuff. It's kind of our real like, okay, we're getting our first taste of the open world, and this is kind of the real like introduction to the game, I would say, more so than the first chapter. And speaking of right off the gate, I want to talk about fucking Broden, because there's been a lot of discussions online about who this dude is. And I personally think, and I'm gonna go with this, and I'm putting my chips in right now. He is definitely an Angeal clone of some sort. There's no way I'm not hearing any other possible opportunities. He has to be. He has to be. There's no. I don't know. But what do you have an opinion?
I don't have an opinion, but I've heard plenty, and this is what I like about Broden is he just opens discussion. Because I've heard people try to associate him with the Valentine family because he has a bit of a vampire-ish look.
Oh, yeah, he does look like a Bloodborne character, so I could I could totally see why people would say that. But I mean, for me, it was something it didn't even really settle in for me until I think because we do see him again later. Also, spoilers as well. Even I know we're talking about chapter 2, but spoilers for all of Rebirth. So we'll try and keep it to a minimum. But
along the way, listen to this when you're done.
Yeah, we'll try and keep things as spoiler free as we can. But if certain things come up, we're obviously going to talk about them. But it wasn't until he popped up later when I was like, and I actually was like really looking at him and being like, because at first I'm like, oh, he's just helpful NPC innkeeper man who has some bad blood with Shinra, and I'm like, yeah, okay, didn't really think much of it. And then I was really like taking a look at his face, and I'm like, why does he look familiar? And then it just like clicked out of nowhere for me right then and there. It was like, oh, he looks like Angeal, but he's like just different enough where he's not like, he doesn't look exactly like him. So I'm like, okay. And then once you find out later on in this chapter that he's suffering from Mako poisoning. So you're like, okay. So something's going on here, and he's also kind of very shady about like what what's his deal is and what's going on. So I just think that and since we've gotten a lot more throughout this game, a lot more detail and definition into like the soldier program and things like that, we're seeing a little bit more. There was a fun theory that people were positing about Roche that we'll get to when we see him later down the line here. But I mean, just from looks alone, I mean, I look at Broden's face and I'm like, that's Angeal. And no one can convince me otherwise. He may not be like perfect, but I think at this point, because there were Angeal copies, we had director Lazard was one also, or was he one and then he turned. I feel like I don't remember that part of Crisis Core as well, because it's kind of, there's a lot of shit going on with Dr. What's-His-Face as well, and there's just a lot of things happening towards the end of that game that I feel like a lot of it kind of gets left by the wayside, because obviously you have the amazing finale that kind of outshines everything that happens right up before then. But I think there's a pretty good, solid case just for looks alone. I mean, honestly, it feels like when we first started getting the trailers for Rebirth and trying to figure out who the Hooded Man was. Although this is I feel way more confident about this one.
Yeah,
than
and I
I
think,
than I did about the Hooded
identity
Man.
aside, one of the things that I think so interesting about Broden and characters like him, one, he's a prime example of something that was added to the original story that fits right into the
Hmm.
plot, right into the themes, right into where this is all going. But one thing that I love that Rebirth is doing, and we'll certainly talk about it in later chapters when characters like Roche show up, but one of the things that Rebirth does so well is Cloud's fear of this degradation, Cloud's fear
Hmm.
of him turning into these hooded characters, these hooded figures, and seeing people that he's friendly with, like a Broden, like a Roche, essentially watching their slow demise and their, fall from a more
That's
vital
gonna be
person
me.
into that figure. It makes Cloud's fears all the more real, and you feel him
Hmm.
more because he's watching people around him who went through what he went through not ending up with a happy ending, and it makes you feel for him and his personal anxieties.
Oh, for sure, and makes it a lot more. It's a much more visible thing than oh, he's just he went through a traumatic event and now he is suffering mentally and just trying to block all those emotions out. Like, I mean, that's obviously still part of his character, but I feel like this kind of adds a little bit more texture, just a little bit. My favorite word, texture, to his character a little bit. And because I don't think the cellular degradation stuff, I could be wrong, but I feel like that wasn't brought up until Crisis Core. Like, I don't think that was a thing beforehand. I could be, like I said, could be wrong about that.
No, it's in the original. It's just not conveyed nearly as well.
Yeah, it wasn't like
It's
at the
funny.
forefront.
The original conveys a lot of things better than the compilation, but the cellular degradation is better conveyed by the compilation.
Yeah, and I think it is something, as we see the cells and, geostigma and all these things are very, very closely intertwined. So I think it does more of a service for the story to kind of make it a bit more front and center, and to even put a character like Broden in that. Even though I feel like if Broden wasn't there and they didn't do anything with him and they still had all the Roche stuff happen that happens later, would also still be very effective. But giving some, because even though it sounds preposterous, but there's a lot of people out there that don't like Roche a lot, so they don't really know the magnificence of such an amazing, the best character of the last decade of video gaming.
They don't get it. Just
They
put it
just
that
don't
way. They just
understand.
don't get it.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe they wanted to put another other character in there that's a bit more neutral, I guess, and that doesn't really, because he kind of doesn't really, he's more of a passive character in this. I mean, he helps in Calm a little bit, but he doesn't really have much to do with the overarching story. As well, definitely not as much as Roach does later on, for sure. But I don't know. I think it definitely helps the story and whatever this new story that they're trying to tell, and all these other concepts that they're reintroducing back into the story, and all these other things. I feel like are just, it's only to the betterment of whatever story they're trying to tell. Whatever, we still don't even know, really, truly. Even though, so I don't know. Was it Kitase or maybe it was Nojima that said that before Rebirth had come out, that like, oh yeah, well, you guys, once you start seeing stuff, you'll know what's going on. And I'm like, I don't think that was true.
I believe that was Kitase.
Yeah,
It's
but
like, yeah, okay.
yeah, but yeah, I think yeah, and Trey's saying here, I agree with it being one of the best. I love how much depth they added to Calm with it being like Nibelheim and being replaced by Shinra. Yeah, and honestly, I think Calm is a really good. Speaking of Calm, I think is a really good. Not only, it's like a great starter town for this game, because I don't know, it just kind of gives off a really good like starter town vibe in a lot of the ways.
I think what makes it cool, right, is anytime you kind of I guess, immerse yourself in one of these fantasy worlds. For me, I know one of the questions always comes up is like, yo, what would it be like to live in this place? And I think Calm like so perfectly activates that part of my brain. And I don't know if anybody else feels similarly, but like once I was in Calm, I was like, Yeah, maybe this is where I would like set up shop in this world. This place looks awesome, and I did appreciate that it took a lot of inspiration from the city of Amsterdam, like a
Hmm.
lot. So
Honestly,
I
I
just thought
feel
it was such
like
a cool little town, you know.
yeah, I feel honestly, I feel like Calm could be at a Disneyland resort somewhere. You know, like if we were ever to get a Final Fantasy world like theme park, you know, holds shindig, like I think they could easily like Calm to me looks like the place you would go and be like, oh, this is the you know, it reminds me a lot of like Epcot. For anyone who's been to Epcot in like Disney World, that kind of I don't know, kind of gives off that kind of vibe to me. I don't know. I remember when I was playing through it again, I just kind of remember remarking like this is just a I don't know if it's the just the aesthetics of the place or it looks kind of like you said kind of Amsterdamish, kind of European-y. That's definitely a better way to say that, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, I think it looks great. The music, the calm theme is fantastic, and just every you know is another example of one of the many things that they did in this game that I feel like really kind of elevate it to another level and be like, oh, this is you know, because in common the OG is like, oh, you know, it's a you know, just like oh, the first place you go to after Midgar, and you're like, oh, okay, and it's just like a very and even though here it kind of plays that same function of like it's kind of just a stop along the journey. But although you do come back later and do some side quests and stuff, but I feel like it's very well implemented here, and it just looks great. And I think, and it kind of speaks to a lot of the other locations in here that they all really translated the feelings of these places really well in this new telling of them. Because you know, for a lot of these towns in the OG were just like, oh, here's like a screen or two screens, and that's it. You know, and the seeing them sort of extrapolate upon that and build out from you know what can be a very limited view of something is one of my favorite things about this game honestly is that they were able to really make this world feel real in a way or feel like it's not just like oh hey we got you know stuff you know it doesn't feel like a theme park even though I just made that analogy it doesn't feel like you know it's like oh there's people here it kind of and like you know they kind of nailed that with Midgar in remake a lot. I feel like there's just like, oh, this feels like an actual like place. You know, it doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm just here doing my thing. You know, like I wanted to actually stay around and look at everything and kind of really, you know, inspect every little detail and see what, you know, there's a lady over here with a pet cactuar and, you know, like little like things like that. And you're like, oh, you know, just, you know, that little bit of, again, here's that word again, texture, that I think just works so well. But really quick, because I know I definitely want to talk about it. Queen's Blood, which I know we had sort of
Amazing.
kind of touched upon a little bit. I coming into Rebirth, I was very skeptical about Queen's Blood. At least in like I'm, you know, in a way of like, all right, well, I'm gonna try it, obviously, but had no real expectations to stick with it or you know really do like oh I play it once maybe for the tutorial and that's kind of it and then immediately getting like oh no like it was almost like right away that my that I was like oh wait no this hold up wait a minute this is something's happening here something's happening inside of my body that I was not I was not expecting. And yeah, it ended up being like kind of one of my favorite, if not my absolute favorite mini game in the whole thing. Because I think, I mean, there's a lot of stiff competition, let me tell you. With all the really great mini games in this game.
Some are
But
some are great.
some are great.
Like Queen's Blood.
Like Queen's Blood, yeah. That's like, you know, that's like half of them right there. But yeah, no shade to Gears and Gambits. Although if you like Gears and Gambits, I think you might need some help potentially, because I cannot imagine anyone being like, oh yeah, that's my favorite one. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I guess we should Unless was there anything else you wanted to say about like Calm in particular?
One that I think it set the tone.
Hmm.
This idea that, which was, in my opinion, was missing from the original, and anyway, I don't need to excuse it. Everyone knows I love the original. I can
Hmm.
critique it without excusing it.
Oh,
That's it.
well, I'm judging
I
you
love
super hard
that
right
this
now.
set the tone that, yeah, our party is a group of fugitive terrorists who are wanted and shouldn't be allowed to walk into every town in this world has to offer without some resistance, without some
Right.
suspicion. And whether it be Broden and Calm or it be Rhonda and Junon, I like the idea that, as powerful as Shinra is, these fugitives can't just be walking around without consequence. And I
Right.
think setting that tone to me added a thrill to the adventure that wasn't there before. And I, for one, appreciated the hell out of it.
Right. No, I absolutely agree, and I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here, but I like that they sort of played with that a little bit when we get to Junon. They kind of play with that of like, oh yeah, and even when we get to the Mithra cave and the whole fight with the Turks, and then Sung's like, yeah, if you guys don't get in our way, we're not gonna get in your way, type deal, and then kind of seems like, oh, maybe this is the part where like, oh, maybe they're gonna be like, all right, yeah, you guys do whatever you want, go, have your fun road trip or whatever you're doing, and we're not gonna, yeah, we just want we don't want no beef with you, we don't want no beef with us. And then they kind of throw that out the door in kind of a really dumb way, but when we get there, I'll I'll talk about how I feel about that. But yeah, no, I absolutely I agree with that sort of I don't even really call it like a subplot, but it kind of like, just like a little in the background sort of thing of like, oh, you can, you know, sort of be like, all right, well, there are actual stakes here. Although that feeling does diminish later on, as 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 we'll
And
get
we'll
to.
certainly talk about that when that time comes.
Absolutely.
I'll have plenty to say.
But yeah, I think pretty much like for Calm, like I said in the beginning, was kind of it's a really good starting spot for everything, and kind of especially after how the last chapter ends, and kind of that awkward conversation with Tifa, and how kind of like on edge it made me at this point. It was nice to literally and figuratively go to Calm and sort of be like, oh yeah, like, oh yes, I feel so happy, and the music's all whimsical, and yeah, there's a lady with a pet cactuar, like all these other little things, and you even go out and when you leave the hotel and you go out, you talk to Tifa, and you're talking, this is where we also get introduced to like the I don't even know what to call it, not like RPG aspect. I mean, kind of, because you have certain dialogue options during certain conversations that I guess I don't actually know what they affect. I don't know if it's something like if it just affects what is said in that moment, or if it has further implications down the road. I'm not entirely sure about that, but then they're kind of like just trying to like be like, oh yeah, this place reminds me of where we made the promise, and I got kind of scared at first because I'm like, is it really okay to just be talking about this shit again? Like nothing, like none of that just happened. But honestly, Tifa and Cloud's whole thing, pretty much throughout all of Remake and for most of Rebirth, is just kind of like, yeah, we're not gonna mention it. We're not gonna bring it up. Let's just talk about literally anything else except for that thing that I really want to know what the fuck happened. And Tifa trying to navigate that, especially with some developments that happen later on that make things a bit more awkward somehow. But like I said, we'll get there when we get there. But I like and this is also kind of our formal introduction to Red being in the party, and I just I liked everything we have here. We had that scene with Aerith in the bell tower when she's kind of like, hey, is everything cool with you and Tifa? And Cloud's like, yeah, Yeah, we're fine. Yeah, everything's cool. She's like, okay. And because like we as the audience obviously know that they know, and I honestly love how later on we'll see kind of that similar thing where Aerith and Tifa have their own little like uh girl romance going on, and Cloud's kind of left out, and we as the audience probably know what's being discussed. But I like that they kind of leave it vague, because we're meant to be taking or seeing this story through Cloud's perspective in a way, sort of, kind of, he is the main character, after all, and we're supposed to, I guess, more attached to him, and meant to be seeing it through his perspective. So,
Well, I like the idea that, Cloud obviously is the unreliable narrator, but
mhm,
that I don't want to say at the core, but towards the center of Tifa and Aerith's friendship is this struggle to create a reliable narrative, trying to figure out, what does he remember? What doesn't he remember? Does he know
mhm.
Zach? Does he not know Zach?
Yeah, she's
It's
very like calculated in what she tries to say to him, and then like if there's any sort of pushback or anything, she's just like, okay, yeah, no. She gets like, she kind of shuts down, and we see later on she does try to poke and prod a bit more, because obviously she wants to know, like, why, how is she just supposed to be like, oh yeah, I guess we'll just, we'll never talk about that crazy fucked up thing that, of our hometown getting massacred and our parents dying and all that stuff. Yeah, that's fine. So I think that it's a good, the best way that they could have approached it here. And I mean, it's kind of, very similar to OG as well, kind of being like, all right, well, obviously it's a touchy subject, so we're not going to go into it, but we got to go into it at some point. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think, because there was also, like I said, this is kind of our introduction to how the rest of the game sort of goes. We get our first like side quests here, although I think those kind of happen after our story stuff here. So, as what we were alluding to before and talking about, Shinra comes a knocking, as they do, because they're like, hey, where the fuck are these people? these people that may or may not have committed what was the term that they used? Weather warfare on Midgar. That's what they said, that Mayor Domino's like, oh, it's a demonstration. Oh, which I guess we should. I totally am now just thinking like we kind of skipped over the part where, so in the prologue in the first chapter with Zach, we kind of get, that news reporter guy talking about stuff, and we do hear it a bit later on as well, and then we hear it in the beginning of this chapter, I believe, right? And then we're meant to sort of believe like, oh, the stuff that happened in, that's the kind of first inkling of like, is there like what is like, is there timelines? Are they this? Is it the same? Is Zach here? Like, what's going on? And as we'll sort of discuss that later on in when it's more relevant to the story. But I do like that was kind of the first little tidbit of like, oh, what is it happening? Are the events happening the same way in the same places, and are there certain aspects that are bleeding over? Was that a ghost transmission through the radio? But yeah, I think this, again, just another little piece of it that kind of they do. It's more that like meticulous crafting that we've often discussed about, that goes on, that we saw a lot in Remake and is laden throughout all of Rebirth, and I'm sure whatever the third game is, it'll be the same, where you just feel that like, okay, they're very carefully putting things in certain spots and showing them in such a way to have you, to kind of lead you in a certain direction, and then they sort of play with your expectations a bit later on with how things play out. And they're always trolling you, basically. I feel like the game is always trying to troll you with like the overarching like meta story that's going on, and just trying to distract you with like, oh, look how pretty Calm looks, and look how look how all this Shinra airdropping into Calm and all this other stuff happening. But then it's always like in the back of your mind, like, what are they talking about? What's going on? And I just like that little sort of like I don't know, lack of a better term, like breadcrumb storytelling in a way, you know?
Especially in the beginning, right? Because you don't
Hmm.
you're already overwhelming the player with new controls, new maps,
Yeah,
lots of
Zach.
new.
You know,
Yeah.
like all this crazy shit just happened, then you're trying to be like, okay, you know, getting over that awkward conversation with Tifa and like everything's cool, like, and they're like, you know, like they know like just enough to kind of give you a little, you know, like kind of keep things rolling along, you know. And yeah, Trey agrees that intricate storytelling is almost an understatement with how well they weave the webs. Weave the webs like they did.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that's I think that was something. Even in, like I said, in remake was pretty easy to catch on. It's like, oh, like this is everything, every line, every like it feels like every line, every camera angle, every little tight, like tiny little thing that you could possibly think of has been considered uh, in the how they're going to tell this story. You know, like this is something that maybe you don't necessarily think that with other games because it doesn't really. I feel like a lot of games don't really have this. You know, not like a diss or anything, or saying that FF7 is like a on its own sort of thing. But you know, you don't get a lot of games that have stories that are that interweaved, I guess, you know, or that they don't have the opportunity to do those sorts of things because, you know, well, I mean, and nowadays, especially, you get a lot of games that are just like, oh, yeah, we're just going to push them out, you know, whatever. It's not really story based or whatever. It's kind of, you know, live service or some other thing. But, you know, single player games, I feel like there have been a lot of great single player games that come out, but are not maybe not too focused on the story, or like the story's not like the main element of it. So it's kind of it's a nice thing to see regardless is basically what I'm trying to say. Is it's something you don't see as often anymore as we probably should, honestly. But um you know, it's yeah, something you don't really see, and you can really respect it a lot more, I feel like, because you don't see it that often. um But what we do get to see very often in this game, and something that I love, just all the dialogue with the characters. Which again, I will always.
Mhm.
I think I can probably confidently say I will talk about that in pretty much every chapter because there's just so much great dialogue and character moments, just like riddled throughout this entire game. And we get to see that here. One of my favorites, after Shinra comes and you know, they start looking for everybody, and then we're going down the pole with Aerith and making like this whole big escape, which I mean is another one of those segments that on a replay kind of hurts it a little bit because you're just like, all right, come on, I gotta slow walk over the scaffolding, so just to get from here to there. But when everyone finally meets back up underneath the inn, and there's that kind of like unspoken like stuff that's going on where you have Aerith and Cloud coming in together, and Tifa kind of looks like, oh, hey, where were you guys? And she's like, oh, we were on a date. And then she's like, Tifa's like, oh, really? And then Cloud's like, just like didn't not really not saying anything, but you could tell just from their facial expressions what's going on, and just maybe kind of jealous or like, oh, what's going on between those two? And like Barrett can even tell, and he's just like, all right, enough of this, enough dating until until we get out of here. And then everyone's just like, huh. And then Red, even though he's not involved in the conversation, also like shakes his head yes. Even though he wasn't dating anybody. Jill says he saw her ponytail and pulled away. Yeah, that's all. That's all he needed. But then we get our introduction to the grasslands, which is our first like actual open area in the game. And I think again, kind of with Com being a really good starter town, I think the grasslands is a great starting area because it's beautiful. It's expansive, and there's just kind of it honestly is a lot. And that was why when I first started playing, I was a lot more like, okay, I'm gonna do everything there that can be done in the grasslands, and like I'm gonna 100% all the areas. not thinking that every other area in the game was going to be as like packed with stuff as the grasslands is. And there's some areas that are even bigger than the grasslands. I think, well, I think a good chunk of them are, if not most of them. But it's a lot. These are like huge areas, and they do, to their credit, there is a lot of stuff to do. For our boy Chadley, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Chadley,
the Chadster, which I feel like this game may have calmed my hype for Chadley a little bit. Sadly, I feel like the way they used him in this game, kind of, which I guess we could just talk about Chadley. So when we get to the Chocobo farm, we're doing stuff for Bill and the kids there, and then eventually we run into Chadley, and he is our sort of world exploration guy that constantly pings you after everything you do to be like, oh, Cloud, thank you for doing that thing. Thanks for beating up that monster, or what, And I think that's what kind of over time, because it was just like, oh, after every like map event that you do or world event that you do, he always comes in, and then we also have, which I don't know if we get introduced to her here or a little bit later on, but Mai, which is his like gender bent counterpart.
Dude, I have to tell you, I adore her. I think it's so freaking
I honestly,
funny.
And I think that's why I kind of started turning a little bit away from Chadley and a little bit more towards Mai,
it's
honestly.
the opposite. She brought me closer to Chadley.
Really?
As much as I adore her, I can't stand her at the same time. And this is what I love about the character. Because if you notice, dude, in those missions, in those like little hunt missions, combat missions, she will not shut the hell up. She just keeps going and going and going. And every time Chadley finds a new creative way to tell her to shut up, I was dying to, sometimes even belly laughing. Honestly,
I'm not gonna lie,
the Chadley-Mai rivalry and the fact that they were like both competing for Cloud's attention and approval, it's something I never asked for, would have never known I wanted. But my God, it just made those little extra side quests extra endearing. Motivated me to do them and take that detour a little more. I absolutely loved it, man. These are the kind of things you add to a side quest that makes players want to do them.
Exactly, and I honestly feel like, because it was something that it wasn't really until like the late stage of the game, like when I was really trying to like 100% everything, and then I was just like, all right, yeah, Chadley, got another one of the fucking crystal things, yeah. But I usually found myself just skipping past a lot of that stuff because I was like, all right, yeah, you're just gonna tell me, oh, you gotta find the next one over here. But yeah, I did like their bickering. And it is something, again, like you said, that is something that you can add, because Chadley is already an add-on, and then you add more onto him, and that's why I was a little bit disappointed, because I was hoping that Chadley would have been utilized in a better way, but it also, like, it makes sense with his character, the way he's currently being utilized, Like, how are we going to implement this guy who is just kind of like, he's just kind of hanging around in Midgar, and be like, oh yeah, I also, like, interned for Shinra. And I'm like, well, how are they gonna implement him out here? And he's like, oh, I went rogue, man. I'm just doing my own thing.
Yeah,
I'm just a rogue robot, just
like Chadley's in his little intermission arc. Because in the first game, there was this mystery behind him, and you had to do the side quest to like unlock the truth about him, and you find out he was created, modeled after Ojo, and that he's a rebel. Which was so cool. And then, like you're saying, it was a little disappointing that, as far as Rebirth was concerned, it really just sort of aimed his importance and kind of regulated him to just make it just all about world intel, all about side questing.
Yeah,
I do have a lot of faith that in the third game, Chadley's coming around.
Oh yeah, and that's for sure. And things that I'm saying now, like if I'm like kind of on it or kind of warm or kind of lukewarm on the whole thing, I'm fully expecting for something to come, because I don't think they would do my man Chadley that dirty to not give him something to do, because that's what I think, maybe because I was waiting for him to do something for this entire game, and then like, no, he's just, I mean, there's stuff with the, later on with the proto relic stuff that happens. It's okay, like he's involved a little bit, but yeah, I just like him being relegated to just like, oh, I'm the guy in your ear talking, giving you. Oh, we got to go over here, and yeah, like I said, world intel, and like yeah, some things like there were some bits of dialogue that were helpful or added a little bit of extra panache on there, but yeah, I just yeah, sadly, I just kind of didn't really vibe with Chadley as much in this game, and kind of found him to be a little annoying after a while, and like that, I didn't want to think of Chadley that way because I don't know, he's so uninvasive in Remake. It's just kind of like, oh, you just you pass by him, maybe he has a quirky thing to say, and that's kind of it. But now when it's especially if you're trying to do everything and you got this dude every 10 minutes, you're like, all right, Chadley, I get it. All right, I know I need to go find the rest to put it all together.
Hey, listen.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's very very Navi-esque, and you know what? Honestly, I'm one of those people that I'm like, I don't understand why people hated Navi. I mean, she's annoying, sure, but like, I don't know, people like hated Navi for years, like, or just dude. Maybe that's just the internet being hyperbolic, but
as a 9-year-old flubbing around in that world, not knowing where to go, Navi was a lifesaver.
Right. They say, hey, you don't have the Prima strategy guide. You're not going on Game Facts, like we're in the dark ages.
On my smartphone and watch someone else do it.
Yeah. And Ellie brings up another good point. Is at the end, towards the end of the game, he complains that you've stalled progress in the intel. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, they just kind of gave him like all the annoying shit. I don't know why they made him so annoying in this. And like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm, maybe there are people who don't feel this way. And because I feel bad hating on Chadley, because I like Chadley. I think he was a great addition, and is like, I want to know what the fuck his deal is more. Like you said, we know like he's a a little robot boy made based off of Hojo's DNA or something, and was doing God knows what. And I honestly, I know we had toyed around with the idea of Chadley being like a bad guy in earlier episodes. I would love to see that come. I don't know. Like, he has his own little thing. Maybe he has an arc in the third game where he doesn't feel appreciated or something, and he's like, I'll make everyone notice me. Like, maybe not that exact thing, but I think and because of that stuff in Intergrade, when you find out that he's the one who's copying Vice's digital likeness or whatever the hell he's doing, into the system, and he's a little too happy about it. But I mean, he's also he's very passionate about his work, so I don't know if I want to immediately label him as someone who has bad intentions. But I mean, he is based off of Hojo, so that it's always going to be there, even if he's like a tiny little cinnamon roll man. I'm like, I don't know. I've seen you, daddy boy, and I don't know. Which I can't wait until we get to talk about Hojo, because I like what they did with Hojo in this game, but I don't want to get too into it now, obviously, because we don't see him for like quite a little bit. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, we're talking about Queen's Blood. There weren't really a lot of like memorable side quests here. I say that, but I'm now being reminded of we get reintroduced to Beck's badasses that I was not expecting. at least not this early on in the game. I would have thought later they'd be like, oh, maybe they show up at the gold saucer, and then you have a like, oh, it's you guys type thing, which they kind of did that anyway, but just had it be part of, I think it was the Proto Relic quests in the Grasslands area was tied to them. And I mean, yeah, I kind of like Beck's badasses in Remake. I think maybe the bit went on a bit too long, and as I say that, the bit continues in this game. It just the whole like do recompense hilarious, but then they just carry that bit out for forever. I think it just goes on a little too long, in my opinion, but I don't know. It was nice to see them, and I'm sure they'll be back in the third game. doing some other wacky scheme or something, and getting up to
they're
no
like
good.
to me they're like a Key and Peele skit. Like they're funny, but then the last like 10-15%, I'm like, okay, wrap it up, wrap it up.
Like, all right, guys, yep, get it. I get it. You
Made
guys
this
are
like
not the
3 times
brightest.
already. Let's go.
And you have the one guy who just kind of just goes, ooh, he just like doesn't ever speak actual words, but then watch, he's gonna end up being the one guy who speaks like the most eloquently or something. He's just like, oh, I couldn't say I can't really say anything with this mask on, guys. I don't know. I've been trying to talk this whole time, and you guys haven't been listening to what I've been saying. But yeah, I don't know. I think just as since we're talking about characters getting reintroduced from remake, yeah, I think it's fine, and I think them being sort of relegated to this and then not really seeing them ever again outside of that is also fine. I fully expected them to just be like a throwaway gag at the most in this game, but yeah, at least they gave them something to do, and yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. There wasn't really, I guess, the Chocobo Ranch stuff. But yeah, we get to do our first Chocobo getting quests, which I was a big fan of those. Honestly, I wish there was a separate mini game dedicated to that stuff, because I thought that stuff was fun, and that's something I feel like you could have branched out into something. Maybe help at the local Chocobo farm or something, and be like, oh, we need to catch some more wild chocobos, for whatever whatever reason. Because I feel like you only really do, that's one of those mini games that you only really do a handful of times. I mean, it's better than the Mako vacuum for sure. But I think watching paint dry would be more fun than the Mako vacuum, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Was there any other ones? I mean, I guess the stuff on Bill's farm with the kids there, finding out about their backstory and like their parents got killed by Sam, or all this other kind of crazy stuff going on. You're like, oh, I liked Sam, and now you're like, oh, should I like him? I don't know. If he's like getting these kids' parents killed, I don't know what the hell I should think about this guy.
For real. The dark workings of Chocobo Sam.
You never know. Yeah, he disarms you with that southern drawl, and then you don't think about all the horrors he's committed. I mean, at least okay. You know what? As long as he's not abusing any chocobos, I think he's okay. A win's a win. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, there was the bartender guy in Calm, and he made Tifa's drink, or that he had heard about Tifa's drink or something, and then he remade the Cosmo Canyon drink. And he's like, "Oh yeah, there's this bar in Midgar that was really popular for their drinks." And she's like, "Oh really? Please tell me more." Yeah, I like those sorts of, because a lot of the side quests in this game may not be like the most memorable, but I feel like there's a lot of I don't know. Again, it's like a lot of it's just kind of cute stuff, and just all kind of just fleshing out these characters and the world a little bit more. And I think all of them kind of serve a purpose, minus the chicken one, which we'll get there. The chicken one. Well, no, actually, I say that, but the chicken side quest did kind of, it had a good ending, but was not a worthy payoff after doing all the things you had to do during that side quest. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Was there anything else in like the Grasslands area that was like really stuck out to you? Because I'm trying to think. I mean, like I said, it looks pretty. It is like it functioned really well as an opening area. But I don't feel like there wasn't too much else to say about it.
Well, I mean, I liked that it was, no pun intended, and even though it's like fugitive chase scenes and stuff like that, very calm way of introducing you into this world.
Yeah.
Because again, there's this open grasslands and even the side quests too. The nature of the side quests are very calming
Yeah,
and
it's very
almost
low
redemptive. Like,
stakes. Like there's not a lot of I mean, but the Bex Badass is probably the highest stakes that we have in the whole thing, and it's
well,
basically like a Scooby
and
Doo
then you have
episode.
that. And I don't know if you brought this up earlier. I don't think you did, but you have that Tifa side quest where you go to a bar to get a drink, and turns out the guy serving you knows how to make the Cosmo
Yeah,
Canyon
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that Tifa
That's
made in
I
remake, and
was
it
just
turns out she served him in Seventh Heaven, and he taught himself how to make that drink. He loved the drink so much. So
yeah.
that little things like that too, like that show, hey, like the party of characters like Tifa, they're more than just world-saving fugitives.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
they have
That's
their
what I was saying.
influences
Like
outside of this plot and stuff like that. I don't know. It connects them to the world in a way that isn't too bombastic or dramatic.
right, yeah, and it's like more character building, flavor building, kind of just.
Oh,
Here
it,
comes
it
that word
reminds you of
again.
the life.
Give a little bit of texture, to
Well,
the
it
rest of the
reminds you of
world.
the life that's waiting for Tifa after this journey's over. And to shine a light on that at the beginning of the journey is it's just so again,
Yeah,
it's such a great
remember what we're
start to
doing
the
this
game. Because
for.
again, you have chapter 1, but chapter 2 is really the chapter that begins the game, begins the narrative.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, and I feel like it does a really good way, and also, because when I was replaying through it, I was trying to look at it through, like if this was someone's first exposure to this, if was Katase's words, where you could start at this game and not feel lost in any way. Honestly, like at this point of the story, at this part of the game, I still agree with that. And maybe as we do these chapter breakdowns, I will give a report if I think that this would be something that someone who has no prior knowledge of FF7 would be able to get through without any any sort of questions or not losing on anything. But as far as now, yeah, as far as chapter 2 goes, out of 18 or however many there are, yeah, I think you could play this game and
14.
not have any 14, right? You could play this game and not have any prior knowledge. I mean, yeah, actually, no, yeah, because if you take the flashback into account, it's like they don't really, aside from sort of some outside references and maybe not understanding that why they're on the run, I guess. But I know, I feel like you could also kind of intuit that together a little bit. Yeah, like I think so far, yeah, it like you said, kind of a great introductory setting for what is going to be the rest of this journey, and is obviously in a figurative sense, but in the literal sense also of like the actual start of the game, and this is your introduction to the open world mechanics and how all that stuff works, and that you're instead of just because what I had feared when I first saw the map and all the stuff, like, oh, you're going to a tower and you're activating the tower, and then a beam shoots out from around the tower, and then other things come up on the map, and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm getting I'm getting Assassin's Creed vibes here. I'm getting Far Cry 3, which is not the worst. I mean, obviously there were a lot of games around 8, 9, 10 years ago ish that were kind of copying, like any open world game was basically like, especially if it was made by Ubisoft, obviously. You go to a tower, reveal the map around you, and then you go do the stuff. And that's kind of the same thing here. But I mean, I guess, yeah, we can kind of talk about the world intel stuff a little bit here as well. Just to kind of get it out of the way. I mean, I think it was a nice variety of stuff. And again, kind of just like it's one of those things, like in the beginning it feels good, and then as you get on later in the game, you're just like, okay, like, oh, I gotta do, instead of, for like the trials for the summons, it's like, oh, instead of having to remember 2 buttons, now I gotta remember 4 of them. Whoa. So it's not like the most engaging stuff. I mean, I think for the purposes of the game, I think it's fine. But it's something that I hope that they work on a little bit for the third game, because, yeah, like I said, after like the third area, I'm just kind of like, all right, I guess I mean I wanna level up my summons, so I gotta do this stuff, and maybe I want to get the material. I do like that the way that they have sort of, instead of having your you're doing the world intel stuff, and it's counting for like globally. You have different, everything's separated by each zone, so you have different like intel points you're getting for each zone, and the rewards, you can only get certain rewards in certain zones, which I mean eventually later on you can just visit Chadley anywhere and kind of cycle through what you have there, which is nice for like completionist stuff, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there isn't much, like too much to say about the like world intel stuff, because it's very much like, oh, go here and do this thing, or go over here and kill this thing. At least not in this stage. Maybe there's some later ones that I'm thinking of that have maybe a little bit more like a story stuff. I mean, you have the proto relic stuff, which is cool, and I feel like is probably the most varied of the things, which would make the most sense, I guess. But yeah, the rest of it, I'm like, I don't know. It's a video game. It's one of those things that are like, I can kind of take it or leave it because it's a video game. Like they gotta put something in there. But I don't know. Maybe just a little bit more variety next time, or I don't know. There's something, because it definitely got a little monotonous towards the end. But that might just be me personally as well, and just the way that I was playing it, and just trying to steamroll through every possible thing that I could do. But yeah, I think. Trying to think, was there anything? I guess the Midgar Sormer, is that chapter 3 technically? I don't know.
Let me check here. I don't,
because I think it
I
might.
feel like
I think
the
it.
end of the battle is chapter 3.
Yeah.
Maybe
So I
I'm wrong.
mean,
Might be wrong.
might be because based on the footage I'm looking at here, it does. I'm not seeing it. But I think I want to say the Mithril Mines is the beginning of chapter 3. Like after you kill the Midgard somewhere. I'm pretty sure. And even though I played it myself not too not too recently, but
You fight Midgar Sormer at the end of chapter 2, and then you get that Sephiroth cutscene.
oh, okay. So all right, then we'll talk about the that fight, which honestly, not like my favorite boss fight in the entire game, but I think as in terms of kind of the theme that we're going with here of like starting area, I think it's a great first area boss. I think Midgard somewhere is absolutely totally serviceable in that way.
Me too. I want to talk about the boss battle itself, but I will say they missed a complete opportunity. You got to know when you're the meme. And FF7 has successfully been the did Sephiroth do this meme. I feel like there's almost a missed opportunity to clown on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, because I when I was replaying it through on the Discord, links in the description, with some folks, I was kind of saying like, oh, I kind of miss, like, I wish that they could have done that, right, and did the thing. But I think within the bounds of this new story that they're trying to tell, like, it makes sense, because in OG, Sephiroth was still kind of a mystery. Like, is he alive? We don't really know, like, what's going on. And I feel like because he's so much more prevalent in this version of the story, they had to kind of go with that route and being like, oh, was that Sephiroth that did that? Or did Cloud do that? I don't know. Or at least like from, the party's perspective, because from their perspective, they just saw Cloud get dragged under by this thing, and then the snake gets yeeted out of the water and then impales itself on a spike. So yeah, it kind of, I totally get what you're saying. Like, it kind of takes away from the meme, it takes away from that mystery, and because I really love that part in OG, because it's a really good like tone setter of like, because if you're playing that game not knowing who Sephiroth is and like whatever, like that's one of those things you look at, you're like, oh, he could do that. Oh, is it too late to back out? It's like, that's who we're going up against. Fuck, dude. So, But I mean, at this point, we've already kind of seen the destructiveness of Sephiroth and what he is capable of. So I feel like they just kind of they needed to like, all right, well, we'll do whatever, And Bree says that talking memes. If Cloud doesn't do his little nervous dance in the submarine in part 3, we riot. I agree. I honestly I feel like that is a pretty high likelihood because something I didn't really notice until replaying it, when you're in Nibelheim, and especially more so when you go back there later on, you can totally see Cloud does the shrug like all the time. Like he does the PS1 shrug all the time, and you just like you don't really think of it because it's not as I don't know, not as like pronounced as it would be on a model made of like 12 polygons. So it's not something you would pick on right away, but like, oh yeah, he totally does do that. So I think that's a pretty high likelihood. I hope they don't do anything. I hope they don't do like another Gungaga thing with Zack at some point. I really hope that they don't feel the need to do that because I don't feel like they would need to do that at all. Even though Zack is, his future is kind of left up to interpretation at this point, and that's all I'll say about that. But I don't know. I think that maybe something that we could talk about is the distinct lack of. There's some memes in this game, I feel like, but nothing like super crazy. Like I would think something like Aerith going, question, does that make me a dumbass? Like that's up there, I think. I would pretty high on the Rebirth meme tier list. But is it even really a meme? Because I don't really see it. I don't know. Everyone has their own memes, I guess, and you can kind of have your own. Just like you have headcanon, you can have your own head memes as well, I guess. And to me, that would count as a meme. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I get like this. I'm having this nagging thought in my head of like I feel like I'm forgetting something, or like I wanted to bring something up, but I don't know what it is. So we're just gonna roll with it for now. Or, I mean, I don't know if we have much left to say at this point. I think we're pretty much. I'm just kind of looking through my notes here. I think we brought up everything that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if there was any other stuff that you wanted to bring up, Nick.
Trying to think. I mean, other than the fact that I thought, just to go back to the Midgar Storm boss fight for a second, I will say I thoroughly enjoyed that fight a lot on hard mode because it was the first fight that let me know, like, okay. Hard mode is hard mode.
This game got hands.
It got hands, and I feel like I'm going to come away from this the same way with Remake, where it's like, boss design between normal mode and hard mode. Because hard mode does not allow you to item your way out of the problem, which means you have limited magic with every fight.
Yeah, no, you have to engage with the systems and engage in them properly.
Anymore. It makes you appreciate the way that boss was designed and the puzzle it's asking the player to solve between weaknesses and staggers and stuff like that. Absolutely. So I will say that I did find that in playing it in hard mode, I really appreciated how that boss was designed.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, I think it's something that I noticed in a lot of the other boss fights because I've yet to play in hard mode, but you can kind of just get the vibe even if you're playing on normal or dynamic. I mean, maybe not so much on normal as I found out. Definitely don't play on normal if you're doing a second or third playthrough of the game because you just absolutely demolish everything. And I thought like, oh, maybe that's just the mobs in the open world are kind of weak, but maybe the bosses will put up more of a fight. And then when I fought the Midgard Sommer again, I kind of melted him and didn't even realize I was melting him until I was like, it took me like 10 seconds to get into the second phase, and I was like, oh, Maybe I should switch it up. I thought I had it on dynamic, and I thought I was just like over leveled for the beginning area of the game, But I was like, nope, nope, that was just on normal, and definitely, definitely would not recommend doing that unless, of course, you're just cleaning up stuff or whatever. Then just do whatever you want. But if you're trying to play through the game and actually like play the game, definitely do it on dynamic at least, if not on hard mode. But yeah, man, they really saw like all the stuff that they had done in remake, and they're just like, yeah, let's just tweak it, and that's all they needed to do. They didn't need to over engineer anything. They just had to look at the shortcomings of the combat system in remake and be like, all right, well, what little things can we tweak here and there, tweak Cloud's moveset a little bit, give him a little bit more options, make him hell of fucking fast and crazy, and I think is a great way to have his character playstyle be in this game, because that was kind of the only. I mean, we had Tifa, and she's fast, but she's still a lot more, kind of plant your feet kind of character, So, like, I think having a more nimble and zippy kind of melee fighter was exactly what. And Cloud is. That kind of, if you have seen Advent Children, I think that, kind of like, oh, all right, like, why wasn't he controlling like this in remake? But, which is, man, when the third game's coming out and everyone starts doing their series replays up until that point, remake's gonna be tough to go back to, man. And I was even saying it during the stream. It's like, man, it's. Even when the demo came out for Rebirth and I was in the middle of replaying remake, then I was like, man, it's really rough. And maybe they'll come out with like maybe they'll like remaster, well, not remaster it, but and then Ellie's saying until you get Yuffie on your team, which, I mean, hey, I think that totally checks out, and I feel like they probably could have maybe not made him that way, because Yuffie, you would get her eventually, but it just makes it so now that you have two incredibly fast people around, and you could just zip around the combat arena and do a bunch of crazy stuff. I know people doing a bunch of like enemy skill stuff with Yuffie, and she can get pretty broken. But I mean, hey, Yuffie's a kind of broken character in not only in the DLC, but in this game as well. She is absolutely top tier. Rarely ever left my party, except for when I couldn't have her in there for AKA like half of this game, and then some parts later on. But yeah, I think I guess just to wrap up our thoughts on Chapter 2 here. Is great. I think it's a really great, like we were saying, a really great starting point for this game, and really kind of eases you into everything, and then hey, like, this is how the rest of the game is gonna be, more or less, minus story stuff and things like kind of like, oh, this is how the open world's gonna operate. This is how side quests are gonna work, and and not for nothing. Also, I think, and that's something that they were very like upfront about, is like, yeah, you don't have to do any of this stuff really if you don't want to. Like, you don't have to do any of it, which I think is great. For the people who maybe don't want to 100% everything or do every little thing you can do, and they just want to experience the story. And there's no, and if you change your mind halfway through, oh, I can't do that stuff in the grasslands because I'm all the way over here. And it's like, no, before like the end of the game, you have you can go anywhere, you can go to any area at any point and everything. If you haven't done it, it's still not going to be done, and you can go back and do it at any point, even right before the end of the game, And I think that was a really good choice on their part to do that. Because, man, imagine having to be like, all right, well, I want to do this side quest now. I got to reload Chapter 2 to do the bar quest again, or something like that. But yeah, this is a pretty good video game, guys. I don't know if you're aware, but Rebirth, game of the year potentially. I don't know.
In a completely unbiased, objective opinion of mine, yeah, of course.
Yeah, totally
The
unbiased.
contest,
I mean, what
totally unbiased.
what is that? What else is out there to contend with it? Well,
Black Myth,
Black Myth
Stellar
Wukong.
Blade,
Yeah.
and there's one more. There's one more big hitter on
Stellar. I
this
would love for
list here.
Stellar Blade to be. I mean, it might get nominated, but I'm not sure. I don't know if it had
Yeah,
that kind of
that one's a little
appeal,
more flimsy compared to Black Myth Wukong, which I think is
which
totally
is
getting nominated.
probably going to get it. But I guess yeah, I guess we'll.
Made too big of a splash not to.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's it for the show. We're gonna do. I guess we want to do a little like after show. We'll just kind of
Yeah,
we're
getting for a
just
bit.
talk and hey, everyone listening to this live, stick around. We're gonna talk about stuff. I don't know. We'll talk about something. I don't know. And everyone who's listening to this on Spotify or wherever else you listen to this thing on, we appreciate you. We love you and appreciate you. And yeah, I guess we'll close it out for this time. And next time, maybe we'll do a chapter breakdown. We have some other stuff in the works that we got some ideas brewing. That maybe we'll do some stuff and kind of break up the chapter breakdowns every once in a little bit here. But yeah, as of for now, it's business as usual, my friends. And yeah, like I said, if you're watching live, and if you're not watching / listening live, we have a YouTube channel that we're now streaming this on, and I'm sure you probably can from the beginning of this episode, depending on how much Trey has to cut out of our recordings. Maybe you'll have gotten that by now, or if you didn't, watch or listen to last week's last episode that we did. Yeah, we're gonna be doing these things live, and you can come hang out. You can come chat in the chat, and we might do some pre-show, we might do post-show type deal, and yeah, just have all sorts of fun. Oh, by the way, I guess this I meant to bring this up before, but Ever Crisis has recently. Because I don't know if we talk about this on the show yet, but they recently did they introduced a guild feature into the game, and we do have a Midgar Minute guild, or specifically a Mosey Gang guild, which I may give Trey the code for that. If anyone's interested, anyone who or listening who plays Ever Crisis, if you want to come join the Midgar Minute guild. We should have a link for code for it, whatever, in the episode or something. If not, you can DM me on Instagram or something, or on Discord, and I'll send you the code. Whatever works. But just felt like throwing it out there in case anyone out there wants to do that. We're making big moves over there. Not really, but we're trying. I don't know if anyone still plays Ever Crisis, but it's there if you're interested. But yeah, I guess unless there's anything else you want to add there, Nick, I think I'm gonna count us down into the after show here.
I think I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. All right. So we're still rolling on YouTube. Everything's cool here. Yeah, man.
Now
Chapter 2. And I'm gonna wait because I know Audacity loves to like brick my computer whenever I'm saving. So we're gonna save on that. But yeah, man. What you been up to? What you been playing?
Playing a lot. I've been playing Xenoblade stuff.
Yes, I saw.
I'm pretty.
Chronicles, right?
The
first one.
The first one, and I think the first game is
I'm
a
really feeling
masterclass
it.
in launching a new game. It's an absolute masterclass.
I mean, I did play a little bit of it on the 3DS, I believe, because it originally came out on the Wii, right? And then they did like a remaster type thing and put it on the 3DS, and I think it's on the Switch now. which is probably what you're playing it on. But yeah, I remember I just